Aloha and welcome to the 10th annual I Teach 808 Empowering Hawaii's Teachers in Technology Conference, sponsored by the Augustine Educational Foundation and Sacred Hearts Academy, Honolulu. My name is Melissa and I'll be facilitating this session. We are so honored to have Sumoha here with us today to share her expertise through a 90-minute presentation called 10 Minutes a Day for 10 Days, an Intro into the Principles of Design Thinking. Please be aware that we are recording this session. So if you don't want to be on camera, you can turn off your camera or just watch the video later. The recording will be made available on YouTube and shared to I Teach 808's website a week after this event. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Sumoha.
Okay, thank you so much for that awesome introduction. And yes, thank you so much to our sponsors. This is one of my favorite conferences to be at. So I'm here to share with you about design thinking. And I'm going to acknowledge ahead of time that my title is misleading. I said 10 minutes for 10 days, and it's actually question mark days, because it really depends on your students, how quickly they grasp concepts, how much reteaching, retooling, or practice that they might need with the design thinking process. And so however long you want to spend on this, you can, and you can, adjust this this work to be longer or shorter based on your students' needs. And yeah, let's just jump right in. One place that you can get really great resources is the Stanford D School. And so there will be a link. I have linked to this image, and I'll also go and put the link on the slide after this presentation so that you can go and check out what the D School has to offer. All right, so the way that I set this up is I kind of broke it down. I ended up going to about day 20, but really after day 15, it's kind of like up to you on how long it takes your students to go through a full cycle. So the beginning slides, the first several days are a little more specific and particular in terms of the content that we would be going over. And then I kind of review, okay, once you start getting to the sketch prototyping and the empathy feedbacks in the later on in the cycle, then you have a lot of flexibility as a teacher based on what you're noticing and observing your students are creating or not creating in class. But this is what the flow of how I've made it. So day one, build interest, right? So I've tried to give you best to my ability, the materials that you would need for each day, right? So for like the materials for day one, you'll need a TV screen to display an image. If you don't have a TV screen, you can print things, but ideally you're able to like project something onto a larger screen. And then I'll tell you like what kind of charts you might need, or if you need, like, for example, you're going to need notebooks and paper and something to write with for pretty much every lesson. And then there may be a particular worksheet or chart that we're going to use. So for day one, you're going to be using the See Think Wonder chart. If your students have never done a See Think Wonder chart, previous exposure is needed, or it's going to take longer than 10 minutes, right? So I'm moving on the assumption that your students know what a See Think Wonder chart is, and that that they know what's expected in terms of like how to actually fill this out. And the link, See Think Wonder chart is it's a thinking routine. Harvard Project Zero is a link there as well. It's a free source, so you can get a lot of this stuff online. And here's the general lesson plan, right? So you pass out the See Think Wonder chart, you share an image, you ask students to take some time. I said 3 minutes, right? One minute for each section of the See Think Wonder chart. If they don't write yet, like if you have younger students, they can draw, or it could be group led where like you just talk about it out loud. And then they compare or share their charts with somebody else, and they have a question, an individual reflection. All right, so let's just move through this lesson. Okay, so this is what I would pass out my See Think Wonder chart, and this is the image I would have. And so the students would take a couple minutes, right? 1 minute each. What do you see here? And so if anyone here wants to come off of mute, is there anybody in the room who wants to come off of mute? Not quite. Okay, so, you have them write down, what do you see here? A lot of students will write, okay, student reaching for books, standing on books, right? Um, what do you think about this? And this is kind of where maybe students are struggle a little bit. Well, I think she isn't tall enough. I think she needs to get a book. I think she is going to get in trouble for stepping on books, right? Whatever it is that they may be thinking, and then wondering, right? So this is where we want them to start generating questions. Okay, so that's the chart right there. So 3 minutes individually, and then 3 minutes in pairs and triads. One of the things about design thinking that makes it, I guess, different from traditional, you know, experiences in the classroom is that it really is all about collaboration and relying on or leaning on our peers in order to expand our thinking. So there is a lot of time dedicated to sharing my ideas, me listening to you and your ideas, and us actually like taking each other's ideas and expanding on them. So that sort of traditional model of like, oh, well, this is what I know, and I don't want anybody to look on my paper. We're trying to break kids out of that, right? We actually want people to see our paper. We want to see other people's papers. And we want to start to look at how are we thinking that's similar and how are we thinking that's different. Okay. And then the individual reflection that you're going to leave them with, right, after you do the See, Think, Wonder chart is, so what do you think she needs? Right. And that's the question you're going to leave them with, at the end of the 10 minutes on day one. What do you think she needs? Maybe they write it down, maybe they just think about it. Okay. And then you would come back and you'd start day 2 with that same question. So what is it that you think she needs? All right. Okay. So the evidence. So this is another thing that I did for each day is I identified what evidence you have of their learning for that particular 10-minute lesson, right? So one piece of evidence you have is the See, Think, Wonder chart. And another piece of evidence you have every time you do this is observational data. It's really important that as teachers, we are walking around, listening in on conversations, and we are actually writing down what we're observing our students thinking about, what we're observing them talking about, questions that they might be asking. And then, of course, you have the independent reflection, which they can write or they can say out loud with a partner as well. And you could be listening in. Another thing you can always do with reflections is have them record themselves, and so that they can have like a video diary of their work. All right. Okay, day 2. All right, so we have this image that we started with, and now we're moving on to day 2, which is looking at needs statements. Okay, need statements. We're going to be coming back to need statements throughout the process, right? So you have the image up. They have their See, Think, Wonder charts. You're going to do some guided practice on writing need statements or creating need statements. And then they're going to work in pairs to maybe add 1 or 2 more. And then you'll have some time for discussion, right? Where they're going to have 3 questions that they're going to be answering and capturing keywords. So let's go through what this looks like. There's materials that you need. So let me see the need statement chart. I'm just going to show it to you because I think I copied it onto the slide deck here. Okay, and those are the 3 questions. So here's what I would have. I would have this up on a large Post-it or large paper or whiteboard, right? The users, their needs, and surprising insights. And this is like somewhat guided instruction, right? So I would go back to that picture of the girl and I would ask him, okay, so how would we describe her? She's our user, right? So how would we describe her? So they may say, oh, student, girl, right? There's all these markers. And then now we're going to start to think about she needs to do what because of what. So here's an example. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Here's an example, right? So the 4th grade student at XYZ school, we might be making some assumptions about her, right? Needs to reach the book, needs to find some answers, needs to discover new information, needs to understand what she's learning, right? So we're just moving on our assumptions here. All right, or the very tall 5-year-old in flat shoes, right? So you want your students to start kind of looking at that image of the girl standing on the books and seeing how they could describe her based on what they see. Okay. And now we're going to move to insights here, right? So these are insights, right? Okay. She's trying to reach the book because she's trying to finish a book report. Or the very tall 5-year-old needs to find some answers for a school project to do good in school so she can go to her friend's birthday party. Okay. We're trying to get to the reason why she is up on those books trying to reach that book. She's trying to discover new information about whales because it's her favorite animal. She's trying to understand what she's learning in social studies because it connects to her family history. So you're going to have to model, this maybe a couple of times, especially depending on how old your students are. I'm kind of gearing this towards the middle school, which, they do pretty okay with 2 or 3 examples, and then they'll do it on their own. So you'll give them time, right? You'll demonstrate for them a couple of these, and then they'll have their own chart, and you'll have them work in a partner pair to kind of come up with user need statements. And then you leave them with these discussion questions. And I put share personal experience here because this is where, as a teacher, you really have the opportunity to demo for them, right? Or model for them your thought process, right? So what we're trying to get to with this need statement is, here we are, we're looking at this girl, we can't even see her face. We're making all these assumptions about her and what she needs. Okay. And we're trying to show the students that, like, this is typically how we problem solve in the world, right? Like, we typically look at somebody else's problem, or we're given a problem, and then we go into our own world, and based on our own assumptions, we then try to come up with solutions. Okay. So we're building empathy for them we're building empathy within the students by asking them to think about the girl and how she might feel if she were to see our need statements, right? So now taking this to me. So how do you feel when someone tries to help you in ways you don't really need help? Right. So I might share a personal story about how one time, one time, my husband thought he was helping me by taking groceries and food that I had out on the counter and, like, putting it away. But really, I had left it out because I was about to come back. I was trying to let the meat defrost. I was trying to let the eggs come to, the room temperature, and I was trying to let the butter soften so that I could make what I was trying to make. But he came in the kitchen, saw this stuff on the counter, and put it all away. So that when I walked back into the counter or into the kitchen, everything I had pulled out was back in its place, or in a different place, maybe, right? Because he rarely puts things back where I want him to. So, excuse me. Excuse me. So the more personal experiences, that if you can give a really specific detail to them, then it gives them a chance to think about, oh, okay, when has that happened to me? Right? Or have you ever gotten a present from somebody, and your first thought was, why did you get me this? Right? How did you feel? Like, I remember getting these, I have someone who gave me, like, they're like little round, they're like made of yarn, and they're little round, I guess, coasters. And I had that, like, why are you giving me this? Like, I have coasters, right? Like, okay. And how did it make me feel? Well, it kind of made me feel like, wow, I don't think you really know who I am. Or you must not really pay attention to me in my life, because this is not something that I want in my house, right? Um, and then I want to think about, so what if I'm wrong about what I think this girl needs, right? And what would I do to find out? So you're going to have them, you could take it question by question, right? Like, maybe as a teacher, you do the first question and you answer it, and then you say, okay, now talk with your partner. When has this happened to you? And you give them time. And then you come back and you go to the second question, and then it goes back to them, right? So the ping ponging helps too, especially the younger the students. If you just do one thing at a time, that's usually helpful. And then as the students are sharing their answers, right? So how do you feel when someone tries to help you in ways that you don't really need help? You want them to be writing down in Post-its, like, well, how do you feel? Okay, so if they're as they're sharing stories, they're writing down on their post-it, like, um, I feel frustrated, I feel annoyed, like I feel mad. Those are all the things I felt, right? When I went back into the kitchen and all my things were put away in the wrong place, most of them, right? That's how I felt. So they're writing down on post-its and they're gonna come have them put it up on these large post-it papers in the classroom. Okay, so you're gathering, you're helping them build empathy by identifying, what happens when we go into problem solving when we don't actually find out what the person needs. Okay, and then you're also having them think about, okay, well, what if we're wrong about what we think she needs? How do we find out? They're going to be putting down solutions too, right? How do we find out what she needs? Oh, well, maybe we got to talk to her. Maybe we talk to her parents. Maybe we talk to her teachers. Um, maybe some students might be like, oh, we need to find her on Instagram and send her a direct message, right? Whatever it may be. All right. So you're trying to get their solutions, and some of your post work, right? As they turn in their evidence of learning, which is their need statement chart, you're also going to have these post-its as evidence of their learning. All right. And some of your pre-work that you're going to do, or post-work, I guess, post-work from day 2, is you're going to take all those feelings and you're going to type them up for the students. All right. So that the next time when you go into the next lesson, they can see like, oh, this is how people feel when you don't ask them about what they need, or this is how people feel when you give them something that makes no sense to them or doesn't connect to them. And here's how we find out more about other people. All right. And that's when you're actually introducing design thinking. So basically, you're going to share their post-its, you're going to introduce design thinking. I've designed a worksheet for that. There's a video to demonstrate design thinking, and then they're going to have a partner conversation about one of these questions. Okay. So those are the materials. You'll need the post-it paper summary. Okay, that's the pre-work, the design thinking worksheet, and discussion questions. Right. So this was that pre-work I was mentioning. How do people feel when someone tries to give you help in the wrong ways or in the ways you don't need? Whenever you ever gotten a present from somebody and thought, why did you give me this? And how did you feel? And about this girl, what if we're wrong about what she needs? How are we going to go to find out if we're right or wrong? And so this is a great time to introduce design thinking. Okay, so the link takes you to this worksheet. This is basically what it looks like. And these are a couple of slides that we're really sharing with students that design thinking is a human-centered approach to problem solving. Okay, the focus, what design thinking supports us in doing, is developing a common language and a common process. So the reason we use design thinking is because a common language reduces miscommunication, right, between the person you're solving the problem for or designing for and you, the designer. And it also gives us a common process. So you and your end user know, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's a process I'm going to go through, but so do you and your teammates. You and your teammates are actually moving through the process together, right? And that common process allows for teamwork, because the assumption in design thinking is that everybody matters because everyone has something to do. Everybody has something to contribute. And so this is one of my favorite things about design thinking, right? Is that everyone gets to play. And then we talk about this word called iteration or iterative, right? So there's 5 steps. You show them this, flower. There's multiple other images you can find online. So you can do a Google search. I like this one because it shows how it's circular, right? Or iterative. And the whole point is that we go through all of these steps of design thinking because we're trying to build better solutions, right? We're trying to build solutions for what the person actually needs versus what we think, right? Or solely based on what we think. Okay, so they would kind of fill out the chart, and then I think I have time for this video. Yeah, I'm good on time. So I want us to watch this video, because this video really demonstrates what it means to understand what a human need is before developing a solution. So I'm going to press play here.
When you look at what actually connects us as human beings, it's this need and motivation to find happiness and joy in our lives. You want to laugh, you want to play. My name is Jessica Osmidyeme Idoni Matthews. I'm 26 years old, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Uncharted Play. When I go to Nigeria for different family events, as much as I see and experience all of the issues that one would find and expect in the developing world, it's also really hard to miss the amount of happiness and joy infused in daily life. This inspired me to really rethink the function of fun and whether we could use fun as more than just a mere distraction, but as the core platform from which we seek to address social ills. When the socket was invented, the goal was to create something that would address a serious global issue, the issue of reliable power. Nearly 2 billion people are living without reliable access to power. When the sun goes down, that's the end of your day. You're not reading any books, you're not doing any math problems. If you think about how many hours a child loses over the span of a year, and you compare that to the rest of the kids in the world who do have access to power, you start to see how you can be left back on that path towards creating the world that you want. This is the socket. It looks like a soccer ball, plays a lot like a soccer ball, but it's actually a lot more. It's an airless ball that generates electricity when you play with it. Inside the socket, there's a pendulum, a generator motor, and a lithium-ion rechargeable battery. When the ball rolls, the pendulum turns the generator that then powers up the battery. After 30 minutes of play, you can get over 3 hours of clean, renewable light. So the idea here is we're providing a platform for play to make the journey towards the solution that much happier. In 2013, I brought my team to Nigeria and met this kid named Josiah. Josiah is a shy 14-year-old boy who didn't really show much interest in science, but he loved soccer. We showed him the socket, and when we came back a few days later, it was unbelievable what he had done with barely any resources. He went to the dump to get extra parts, LED lights and batteries and wires, and had created larger lamps for his family to use. Honestly, I remember looking at him and turning to my head of engineering and saying that this kid is gunning for your job. He found his genius in electrical engineering. He now believed that he had the ability to make a difference in his community and in the lives of all of his friends and family. There are so many brilliant people in this world, and simply not enough people telling them that they're brilliant. We want people to realize that with a willingness to play, that they can invent something that makes a difference in their life.
So I saw in the chat box, that is amazing. It really is. And then you're watching, and then we learned about Josiah, and it's like, wow, that's incredible, right? How one sort of exposure to something can lead to this inspired action of like, oh, let me go to the dump and see what I can find and put things together. And the kids have the same reaction to this video, right? Like you kind of feel it in your body, you might get chicken skin. And we're really trying to inspire that for the kiddos, right? And so it's important that we get to this partner discussion. And I know it here, it only says 1 minute. Usually I allow for a lot more time, but I just ask them to pick one question, right? So they often want to take time to talk about like, oh, that's so cool. Like I want to play with the socket. I wonder, I want to see what the inside looks like. They're really interested in the product itself. What we're trying to get them to see is how this person, Jessica, went about creating the socket, right? So she knew there was this huge problem, which was renewable energy or just energy, access to power. She took her own personal experience or something she was invested in, which was visiting Nigeria, which is where she has family roots. And then she engaged in a different way to solve this problem, right? Based on what she observed around her. And so any of these three questions, or you can come up with new ones, right? What did you notice about the main designer and how she went about identifying problems for the people, right? In this particular village. What did you notice about how she got to know them, which is sort of implied with some of the video takes? And what do you think would have happened if she tried to design something without visiting or talking to the folks or the people there, right? So multiple ways to engage in sort of a partner discussion about that. And what that does is we're really, I'm going to kind of move forward on these ones, is we're really starting to build empathy, right? So the key thing in design thinking is that we are explicitly teaching our students to engage in empathy, and we're engaging in empathy in design thinking for the purpose of problem solving, yes. However, we know that like if they're learning empathy for problem solving, they're going to be able to apply empathy elsewhere, right, in other parts of their life. And so the day 4, right, the next 10 minutes is you can do a quick recap of like, okay, so far we've done this. And then we're going to dive into like empathy. What is empathy? How do we engage in empathy? What are some ways that, we might start to do what Jessica did? So is there materials that you need? So here's a recap, right? So the first day we got interested in this person in this picture, right? We use our See, Think, Wonder chart to think about, oh, what does she need? All right. We did our best to create a need statement about what we think she needs. But then we reflected too on like, well, we're making a lot of assumptions here. And how do we feel when someone assumes what we need? Right. And then we started to look at, okay, well, maybe we can use design thinking as a process, right, to solve problems or to figure out what this person needs and solve something for them. And we watched this video that demonstrates design thinking in practice. All right. So that's sort of the general like purpose and how you're going to provoke your students to get interested in design thinking the first couple of days. And then you go into defining empathy. And here it says, how might we build empathy, right? So how might we, if you see in red, feel what someone else feels? How might we challenge our assumptions, right? How might we understand that maybe we don't know? Or how might we walk in someone else's shoes? And this is a visual chart that is linked. So I have all these Google documents that you can make copies of, where we're really looking to do 3 things to develop our empathy skill. We're looking to observe for what is obvious and what is not obvious. We're looking to ask and listen, right? We're looking to ask open-ended questions and spend more time listening than speaking. And we're looking to immerse ourselves in the life of our end user. Jessica was able to do that by traveling to Nigeria, which is awesome, right? She like literally put herself in their shoes by going there. Sometimes when that's not available to physically go, there's ways that you can immerse yourself in somebody else's experience, right? And that's usually through storytelling, maybe watching videos or doing research. So this is a fun thing where like just brainstorm, right? So we have this person, we only see her back. We assume it's a girl because she's in a dress. What is obvious to us and what is not obvious to us? What do we still not know about her? That's observing, right? We're observing this picture again. What questions if we had a chance to sit down and talk to her, right? What questions might we want to ask her? Right? Or let's imagine we were in the library and we could walk up to her and talk to her. What would we ask her? And then how might we live in her life? How do we put ourselves in her shoes? And the students are working together. I like to work in pairs where, okay, let them brainstorm. How do we observe, ask and listen and immerse? Because throughout the design thinking process, this is what you're consistently seeking to do. All right, and then you have evidence of this learning here. I'll click on this. Let's see what happens. I think it goes here. Oh, okay. Well, I'll make sure that the links work for you folks so that you can see them. But it looks a lot like, let me go back. How do I go back? sorry, I'm trying to go back. Previous slide. All right, I'm just skipping forward. Ah, wait. Okay, I'm gonna oh, here we go. There we go. This is how I go back. I go back this way. Okay, so let me put it in present view. There we go. Thank you for that snafu. So this is a chart. It's just on a larger piece of paper, and then there's space for them to write in. Okay, so that's the evidence that they would submit, right, at the end of this day. And here's like, I have these blue slides, right, for teachers specifically. That like one of the things that we have to do is explicitly teach our students these skills. We have to teach them how to develop questions and ask questions. I also wrote developing, tell me about a time when, and we'll go over that today. We have to teach them the skill of interviewing or having conversations, because our students now are digital natives, and to them, like texting back and forth is having a conversation, right? Which it's a digital conversation, but it's not face to face. So we really do need to teach them how to have conversations with people. It's an explicit skill. We have to teach them the skill of recording and note taking, and being able to pick out the important details based on what somebody said, and develop insights, right? So these are like safe assumptions to make, or based on what someone shared with us, like, I think it's safe to go ahead and share this with them. All right, so we're gonna move into ask and listen. So instead of going into observe, I like to go into ask and listen. And if there's time to like jump into like clear, depending on the design challenge that you might give your students, you might start with observation, but I like to go to ask and listen, and then the observe and the immerse kind of comes along. So pre-work, right? You're gonna gather the questions that they wrote in their charts, and you're gonna pick out the great ones, right? So from all your students, hopefully you got a handful of really excellent questions, right, that we would ask that girl. You're gonna have them up on display, right? What makes a great question? You're gonna give them a worksheet, all right? And you're gonna start to identify like, what makes this question such a great question to ask? You're gonna review the difference between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions, and you're gonna go ahead and introduce to them the first design challenge, all right? So this might be, right, there's pre-work instructions here. You would go ahead and type in at least 3 to 5 really good questions that your students created. Have a discussion in class. What makes them so great? How do we know that this is a good question? And then you're going to dive straight into this, right? The difference between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are not bad. They just have a time and place, right? So like if I'm making a quick decision, or if I need a quick decision from somebody, hey, do you want chicken or fish for dinner? Closed-ended questions are great for that, right? Or like, do you want red or green? How old are you? Where do you live? What school do you go to? Well, we need to get like basic demographic information. By all means, use closed-ended questions, right? These are yes, no, good, bad, choice A, choice B questions. What we're trying to do is help our students develop their ability to ask, right, open-ended questions. Because with open-ended questions, there's multiple answers that are possible. It allows for possibilities. It allows stories to emerge. And it also guides people to focus on specific details, right? So what were your favorite parts about today? If we think about a really easy way to distinguish this is like when parents say like, how was your day? And the kids are answering usually with good, okay, fine, right? Versus imagine if a parent asked, so what were the favorite parts of your day today? Like now you're actually got, like they're like, well, the favorite parts of my day, now they have to think, okay, filter favorite parts of today. They may still be like nothing, but you've sort of opened it up a little bit more, right? Or ask them, I want details about what your favorite part is. Or how would you describe the purpose of the class? Instead of, you know, do you like class? Like, no, right? Okay, well, describe the purpose of the class. How would you describe it? Or what do you like the least about being your age? It's really hard to answer that with no or yes, right? So we're trying to get them to develop these open-ended questions. So on this worksheet, right, here's the design challenge. You're the designer and you're going to be designing the perfect workstation for your end user. You can remove that perfect workstation and have it be a backpack, have it be a lunchbox, have it be a bedroom, have it be a birthday party. It could be anything that they're designing. Ideally, it would be something physical or something tangible, right? So like the backpack challenge is, you can Google it, right? Design thinking backpack challenge, and you'll get PDFs of like day by day instructions of what to do. That's the one designed by Deep School. And that's fine. Use the backpack challenge. I like the perfect workstation because usually when I've done this in the past, like when I say perfect workstation, the end users that I go and find are like adults in the school, right? So I want their end user to be somebody who's not in the classroom with us. But if you can't get that, like if you don't have necessarily buy-in from other people at your school, then it could be you're going to create a backpack for somebody else in the classroom, right? And then they're going to come up with these great questions. All right. And that's the evidence for that lesson, that 10-minute lesson. And now we're going to teach them, it's the important thing about tell me about a time when, right? So basically they're going to keep working with that worksheet. All right. And you're going to introduce what tell me about a time is all about. And then they're going to have time to transform their questions into tell me about a time statements. One of the other things that I have here as you move forward in design thinking is I really like to have them work in pairs first instead of larger groups. And I like to have them work with like a friend or somebody that they want to work with because it makes the experience more enjoyable for most of them. And then I also said, tell them that like, hey, if you're gonna be working with a friend, like you guys have to stay on task and you have to make sure you're doing what you got to get done. And if you end up going off task too much or goofing off too much because you're with your buddy, then you'll just end up doing this by yourself, right? And nobody likes that. Nobody wants to do the whole project by themselves. So, so there's another, what makes a great question? They're going to reference the old worksheet. They're going to have the design challenge worksheet for writing on, and then who would you like to work with? You can do a survey. So I have a question that I'm going to address, right? How do they keep track of their progress over time? So depending on the age of your students, like these lessons are extremely guided. You're basically the very first time that you move through design thinking with students, I would absolutely recommend that you chunk and you are actually helping them keep track of their progress, right? That's why I have like specific minutes. So like you have 3 minutes to do this, ready, set, go. You have 6 minutes to do this, ready, set, go. And then the other thing is that the worksheets or the visuals that you're providing them, the things that they're working on, all their evidence for learning, that's something that you would have them keep in their folder. So like as you're moving through the process, you can refer back to anything that they've done over time. And it's kind of ends up being like a nice portfolio of their work with design thinking. In terms of keeping track, as a teacher, how do I keep track of their progress over time? Is I'm looking at what they're submitting and I'm making notes. So in addition to like what they turn into me, I'm also taking notes when I'm walking around the classroom. So like oftentimes I'll be able to know like, okay, these 2 pairs of 2 kids each, these 4 kids, like they get it, right? Because I can see the evidence in their writing. I can hear it in their conversation. I have these 3 pairs of kids who are like not really getting it because their worksheets are blank or like they're like totally off topic. So what I might end up doing is doing a reteach where like, okay, you folks really know what you're talking about. You folks really don't know what you're talking about. I want you to come together, 4 people, and I want you to share. And like the kids will start having aha moments based on what the other team is sharing, right? And then discussions happen. I've also had to like fully reteach things because it like went over their head, and then I had to like break it down even more into like micro steps. But basically their evidence of learning, like all the slides I have here of their evidence of learning, that is keeping track of their progress over time. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's so wonderful. Wow, you're such a great teacher. You take that time to like go through every single one. I've been using Google Classroom, but I've been doing a research project, so it's not quite a design thinking, but I would love to move in that direction. But I just kind of like quickly like boom, it looks like they're kind of working on it, but I like I love that your students are so lucky. Like yeah, you really take the time to like yeah, check each of their work and everything. So from what your experience, what age have you seen design thinking start?
Um, Honestly, you can start with design thinking in kindergarten. Like there really isn't, I think you would adjust. So this presentation is geared, I taught sixth grade. And so this is geared towards like your 10, 11, 12-year old. And then I would say like, if you were going to adapt, some of this work for your younger little baby kids, is that you would just apply, right? Like what is developmentally appropriate. It would probably be a lot more discussion. It would probably be a lot more guidance, but like kindergartners know how to talk. Like they usually don't need help like talking. They just need help like guiding the conversation to be like, okay, so we're doing the interview. So, they may take turns asking one question each, versus like a sixth grader can do like 5 questions for whoever they're interviewing. And if you're doing high school, like you should be having a full 30-minute interview that you can carry all by yourself, right? That's kind of how I would scaffold it based on the age of kids I have.
And sorry, I might be jumping ahead, but like how many design thinking projects are you usually able to do in like one semester or one school year typically?
So I would say the design thinking process, like any part of the process can be applied to any project, right? So the projects I've done that are like just design thinking projects, like I've had the students design a backpack. I've had the students design, they applied it to design a solar oven. They applied design thinking to create a like a nameplate for somebody in the classroom for their cubby, right? So instead of me designing my own nameplate, I had to interview another student, learn about them, and then design a nameplate for them based on what they like, right? And so those ones, right? You can, I probably did like, I think those 3 I did in a semester, right? Along with some of the other projects and work that we were supporting. But you can also embed any element of design thinking into an existing project. So for example, the students were another project we were doing in the 6th grade was the students were going to create, they had to raise money to support a global, to support like a not-for-profit organization that addresses a global issue, right? So maybe I want to raise funds for like an organization that helps, with making sure that, this endangered species stays alive, something like that. So their goal was to raise money, and they were going to do it by creating a product to sell during lunch to raise money. So when they're creating that product, they engage in the design thinking process of like interviewing the kids, the people that they're selling to, finding out the price points that they would be okay with, finding out what they'd like to buy. So they engaged in these steps to actually come to the conclusion of like what product they're going to sell. And then they sold it, raised the money, and then they like did the project that way. So
That makes sense. So like
yeah.
this process can be kind of integrated in mini lessons or large
Mhm.
projects throughout the whole school year. So they might be doing it subconsciously in some areas of their schoolwork. I love this. I think this is my third time listening to you about design thinking, and it's starting to click. And I'm like, wow, this is so exciting. It's so valuable for the students to learn that empathy and that end user mentality. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, totally. And I know, every year I try to think of, based on the feedback I got last year, it was like, oh, we'd love to see more like specific examples on like how you do these steps. And so that's what I designed this time. I was like, okay, and I'm going to design it so that like you have a lesson that you can like take and run with, right? And if you end up not doing the entire design thinking process, like let's just say you need your kids to interview for something, right? Use the parts of this presentation that work for interviewing, like use it to develop good questions, use it to like teach them how to talk to people and how to have conversations. Yeah, so I would say use whatever part fits for what is it that you're trying to do in the classroom.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to have your students, right? So again, we're learning from each other. I generate my own questions. I work with a partner. They share with me their questions, and then I add in, right? Okay, I'm just going to look. I'm about halfway done here. So we're on the step of tell me about a time when, right? So tell me about a time when it's really about gathering stories, okay? And I don't think Steve Jobs came up with this, but this idea that life is about creating and living experiences that are worth sharing, right? And what's worth sharing is our stories. So what we're trying to do when we're interviewing, which is where we're going to, is we're developing these questions because we're going to ask them to somebody. But instead of just questions, we also can ask them to tell us stories, right? That about what matters to them. And so this is an example that I would go over with my students, right? So maybe let's say my great question is, what do you like the most or least about your age? Right? So somebody can answer that. Oh, I really like how, I get to be super independent in my mid 30s. What I don't like is that like I have to make really adult decisions all the time. Okay. Versus and they can then say, so tell me about a time when you really enjoyed being your current age, right? Oh, okay. So now I have to really think like, what's a recent time where I was like enjoying being the age that I am? And it's going to spark a story, right? So we're taking these great questions. How do you like to help out your family? And we're turning them into these tell me about a time when sentence stems, right? How do you like to help out your family? Well, I like to cook for them. I like to clean house. Like I like to, take care of my kids. Or tell me about a time when you cleaned your room or an area of your home. Oh, well, most recently, I had to clean my whole couch up because it had like 5 piles of laundry on there, right? So like whatever that story may be is going to give us some additional details that won't come out when we ask a great question. Okay. This is also about follow-up, right? So let's say I say, oh, so what are some things you do for fun? Oh, I like to dance. I like to cook. And, I like to read. Okay. So I got some details: cook, dance, read. Okay. All right, well, so then now tell me about a time when you went on an adventure and enjoyed it. An adventure? Oh, I recently flew to Big Island to go see my friend, right, who's going to have a baby. And that was an adventure because we went to the farmer's market, we ate. So as I'm answering this question, right, these are also things that I do for fun. Go visit friends, go to the farmer's market, eat really good food. But those details didn't come out when I asked the question the first time. So this sentence stem, tell me about a time when, is essentially like a follow-up question to that great question you're going to start with. Okay, that's what we're trying to get the kids to see. So they're going to do this in partners. Some kids are going to get it, and some kids are going to be like, I don't know what you're asking me to do. So, just small group work, partners, whatever it may be. You may have to spend a little more time on this. But generally speaking, once you do this, If you keep coming back to this over time throughout the year, by the end of the year, when you're like, hey, I need you to come up with 3 great questions and 3 great tell me about a time when that you're going to follow up with. They're going to be like, oh, okay, done, right? And so that's what we're trying to get to, is like, we're having the long road view here of like, I'm going to start this in like baby steps in, you know, the early part of the year, so that by the end of the year, they know how to do this really well, because we're going to continue practicing it. Okay. And again, if you want to survey your kids on who they'd like to work with and then place them, I would do that. I say allow for friends, consider your guidelines, maybe say write 2 friends and then 2 people you've never worked with before in the class, right? I think student choice just leads to overall greater engagement. And then for end users, this is where as teachers, you're going to start really identifying authentic end users. So you want to think who's in your surrounding classrooms, who's on staff, are there active parents in your community, are there community members at large that you can bring in as an authentic end user, so your students are actually designing for somebody that's, you know, not themselves. Okay. So interview prep, I'm going to kind of breeze through like the lesson plan part of it and go to what you need to do. So what I like to provide is end user snapshot, right? So if the students are going to be interviewing, let's say people on campus, because they're designing a workstation for people on campus, I would create a mini snapshot of each of my end users. So that's like a bigger lift on the teacher. Now, you could also give the students, right, go find out these things about your end user: name, age, family, pets, birthday month, lives, born where, years lived in Hawaii, where do they work, what do they do, where are they located, and 3 fun facts, right? Like maybe you just create like a little questionnaire, and like the first thing they do is they go meet with their end user and they're like, hi, we're here to interview you. And they ask all these closed-ended questions, right? To get to know, oh, what's your name? What do you do? Da, 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 right? And then they could create their own snapshot. All right. If you don't have the time for them to do that, you could create it for them. Okay. And then what you're going to have them identify, it's on a worksheet that they already have, is my end user. What do I already know about them? So now that I have their data snapshot, what do I know about them? Okay. And then we're going to go into empathy interviews, right? So empathy interviews generate a general understanding of your end user. You've identified what you already know about them. That's your snapshot. Then you go into identifying the best questions, right? Or tell me about a time when's that you want to ask them, because you're trying to design something for them. And they're going to conduct the interview with an appropriate setup, right? So this is where we have to teach them how to set up. So you like my little like mask gal? This was back when everybody was still having to wear masks, right? So you have your designer. This is a person who's asking the questions. I like to have my students use their iPad to record the entire interview. Okay, so record the speaker on camera roll, right, for the entire interview. The end user can help here by keeping track of time, right? And the end user is the person who's answering the question. They're the person you're designing for. So I have them actually physically set this up in the classroom. I'm like, okay, so I want to see everybody, you know, designers, set yourself up, end users, face them. And I go over like knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder, right? So definitely kind of like you have to teach them, like if they're all sitting, you know, side by side, not facing each other, physically going around and saying, what I'm looking for is that your knees are facing each other and your shoulders are facing each other and your faces are facing each other. And with middle schoolers, it takes some time for them to understand that I'm being serious about this. So they try to get away with it, right? Oh, I'm pretty much facing her or him. Like, I need you to sit like this. This is what I'm looking for. And so, and notice too that I go over with them the importance of not having furniture between you if you can, right? If you can remove the furniture between you and the person that you're talking to, even better. Now, if you're going out in the community, you may end up interviewing somebody where there's a desk between you and them. But I also teach them, like, you can say, oh, is it okay if we sit over here so the desk isn't in our way? And then, I can really just, hear what you have to say or whatever. Like, they just teaching them how to talk to be able to get the person so that they're face to face, knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder without any obstruction so that the connection is happening, right? We want them to start getting connected. And then this is just for like an interview practice, right? Like 4 minutes, set up, press record, take 3 minutes to record yourself asking a question. How does your partner answer? This is just practice with your partner before you ever meeting your end user, right? And save your recording. Because what we're going to do with the interview practice, right? So the sort of flow is that they record their interview, and then they fill out an empathy chart, right? So they go back and they re-listen to their interview. And as they're listening to their interview, now they're taking notes. Were there any quotes or defining words that stuck out in the interview? Were there some thoughts and beliefs that could have stood out? Are there any actions and behaviors that your end user has shared about themselves, right? Look for similarities and contradictions, and feelings and emotions. What feelings or emotions were present in the interview? How do they feel about some of their own stories? Okay, so it is helpful. I had like one group I remember one year I did this. I kind of gave them this chart, and then when I got the charts back to look at them, I was like, oh, they really don't get what I'm saying. Whereas the previous year, kids were like, yeah, okay, I got this, So what I ended up doing is I ended up recording an interview, me interviewing somebody else. And then as a class, we listened to the interview, and I would press the pause button and be like, ooh, I think they just said something here. What did they just say? And we did it as a class, right? So you may have to take the time to explicitly like model again, this interviewing, taking notes, how do you fill out the chart so that they can be successful with it as they move on. Okay. And this chart is available to you folks, right? Yeah, so this is basically my note that like, you may have to spend a lot more time on interviewing, especially if your students have never done it before. And when you set up, you're gonna have to help facilitate setting up the first interview too. I would schedule no less than 10 minutes because you can't really get good information in less than 10 minutes. And that's if the person speaks to the point. Half an hour is ideal. And that allows the students to take turns, right? So if me and my partner are going to go interview, Mrs. Oshiro, then I would go with my questions and I would take the first 10 minutes, record, and then my partner would take the next 10 minutes and record. So we'd have 2 recordings. Okay. Yeah, we can, let's see. Oh, let me get you the empathy chart link really quick so that you can just, there we go.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. And I'm gonna make it be a forced copy so that you can just make a copy of it and then you have it. Let me know if it works. Okay, so they're gonna conduct, now you're gonna reveal to them the person that they're interviewing. Okay, so you're actually gonna conduct the interviews. Here's your end user that you're designing for. And then they're gonna actually conduct their interviews, and they're gonna have a recording of who they interviewed, and they're gonna know who they're designing for. All right, and now we're gonna define their needs, okay? So they have their empathy chart where they've written these things, or they have their empathy charts. You're gonna review with them what they're looking for as they listen to the recording. And this is like days 10 to 12, right? So 10, 20, 30, about 30 minutes, because they're gonna need time to listen to the recording, stop it, write things down in a chart, keep listening, stop, write things down in a chart. And I would have them again do this together so that me and my partner are listening to the same recording at the same time, so we can press pause and be like, hey, I think that was important. I think we should write it down. Where would we write it down in our chart, right? And then they kind of have this, you know, defining their needs. This is where we're trying to get insights, right? What is important to them? What might they need when you think about their workspace? And what might they like or enjoy in their workspace? Okay, because that's what they're designing for. You could replace that, right, with what might they need when you think about their backpack? What might they like or enjoy about the backpack you're going to design for them, right? Whatever it is that you're designing, we're looking for what's important, what do they need, what might they like or enjoy, okay? So they would do that with their partners over a few days. And now we're going to come up with, we're going to circle back, right? We did this with assumptions, right? For the girl who's standing on the books, we had made some assumptions. Oh, we think she needs this book because she's trying to research whales. And now we're coming back to this to say, okay, we actually interviewed the person we're designing for. Based on our interviews, what does our person need and why do they need it? Okay, so they're creating some needs statements. Okay, and they're going to use the need statements to go into ideate. Okay, so this is where they're going to come up with, you're going to need post-its for this, right? So you're going to share the definition of ideate. And then you're going to use the post-its. You're going to have them basically like write down or sketch. I like to sketch, but they could write down for this one as many ideas as they have, right? So when I think about the person I interviewed, in our workstation, she actually needs like a place to put water bottle and her snacks because she's always like thirsty and not eating enough. Or in her workspace, she needs it to be really large because she has a ton of stuff and she always feels like she runs out of space. What she really needs is she needs a speaker to like have some background music, right? Like whatever it may be. They're just coming with as many ideas towards the solution that they're trying to come up with for this person, right? And they're going to keep these post-its in their notebook, okay? Now, here's the interesting thing. The goal for students is to generate as many possible solutions or ideas as possible, right? If they get stuck with thinking about the workstation or the backpack or the whatever, because they're like, well, what I actually found out is that my end user doesn't need a workstation. They need more breaks from work, right? Maybe that's what I found out is they actually don't, their workstation's fine. They actually need more breaks from their work. So then my solution is not going to be a workstation necessarily. It might be something in my workstation to help them take breaks, right? So this is where like walking around, checking in with each of their pairs and like really identifying like, so what did you learn about your person? What did you say they needed? What was important to them? What were they going to enjoy more of? And then have them ideate based on that. And it may or may not have to do with the original thing that we thought we were going to design. Okay. So if they start to veer away from the backpack, it's okay. If they start to veer away from the workstation, that's okay. As long as what they're trying to come up with and design is related to what the person said in their interview. All right. And then I really like how might we, right? So this is another way to frame your need statements. Okay, it's a short video, but I'm going to show it.
Every challenge opens the door for design. By reframing insights into a how might we question, you are allowing opportunity for design. IDEO CEO Tim Brown has said that whenever his company takes on a design challenge, it invariably starts by asking, how might we? How assumes that there are solutions out there. Might suggests that these ideas are out there and they might work and others might not, but it's okay either way. And the we part infers collaboration and that we can do it together and build on each other's ideas. Your how might we statement should be broad enough to allow for a variety of solutions, but narrow enough that it puts users at the center and still focuses on the original design challenge. The phrase, how might we, promotes a specific, optimistic outlook that will launch idea generation. By not alluding to a solution, a well-formed how might we question starts you off in the right frame of mind to think innovatively and produce several new and concrete thoughts.
Okay. So the reason I have them do a round of ideate first is because usually after the interviews, the kids are all like juiced up and they're like, oh my gosh, like they totally need this, they totally need that. I know what we're gonna do, right? So just capitalize on it, right? That's great. I love that you have 5 solutions. Let's get them down. We don't want to forget. Okay. Then we go back to the how might we to be able to expand that point of view that they have, right? Because it really does help us expand our thinking. And I show them that video and then I give them some examples. So let's say my need statement was like giving Gwen needs a way to participate in a new hobby that makes her feel connected to people and so that she feels like she's making a difference. Right? That's what I identified about giving Gwen. Like I thought I was going to be designing a workstation for her. And what I found out is that she actually needs new hobbies that helps her feel connected to people because she works too much, so she feels isolated. And she also wants to feel like she's making a difference. All right. So now my how might we is like, okay, well, how might we expose Gwen to new hobbies? How might we get Gwen connected to new people? How might we find something that Gwen cares about that she can give some time to every day or every week? Okay. So this is the tricky part, right? Because kids here will be like, but I thought I had to design a workstation. That's what we started with. But once you interviewed Gwen, what you learned is that she doesn't need a new workstation. Right? So like, why would we design a new workstation for her if that's not what she needs? We now know that she actually needs a way to feel connected to people and feel like she makes a difference. So that's what we're going to design for. How might we do this for her instead? It might be at her workstation, but I'm pretty sure that's not what Gwen needs, right? So this is where like I would definitely you have the students write their needs statement down, right? They have the needs chart. You have them write it down again, because when they write it again, they're forced to edit their own writing. And then you're transforming that needs statement into a how might we, right? So if I identify like, oh, Mrs. Oshiro needs to drink more water when she's working, right? That's what I identified. Then my question might be, or my how might we would be like, how might we make sure that Mrs. Oshiro stays hydrated during the workday? How might we remind Mrs. Oshiro to drink water? How might we make the water taste better so that she wants to drink it, right? Like whatever it may be, like you have to like give them these examples so that they can do that. And this is the interesting thing. They got all their ideas down, right? You do these how might we's, and they're like, well, everything we wrote down isn't going to work. That's okay. You had to get it out in order to get here. Okay. This is another video. I'm not going to play this, but it's just an additional video that you can share with your students about how might we. So it's a pretty fun one. Okay. And now we get to that part where like we're getting into like the prototype testing and like, wax on, wax off, repeat. So this is the flow, right, of basically wrapping up or getting through the next 3 steps, 2 to 3 steps in the design thinking process, is that you're taking those how might we's and you're now going to sketch prototype. Then you're going to go into empathy feedback on your sketch prototypes. And you're going to use that feedback to help improve your sketches, and you're going to make paper prototypes. And then you're going to take your paper prototypes and you're going to go get more feedback. And you're going to take that feedback to help improve your paper prototype to develop a sturdy prototype. Then you're going to get empathy feedback on that as well, on your sturdy prototype, right? Before you ever actually create like your final product, right? So this is the iterative process right here. And the saying is, right, they say the IDEO saying is like, you want to fail fast and you want to fail cheaply, right? So what we say fail fast, meaning like you don't want to spend 19 hours coming up with the perfect sketch only to find out that like that is not what Mrs. Oshiro needed. Okay, like this is totally, you have not hit the mark at all. That's a lot of time, right? So this is rapid prototyping, right? And the kids always get mad at me because they're like, how am I supposed to do this in 7 minutes? Well, I started the timer. So instead of talking to me, you better start drawing, right? Like that's kind of like you just make them do it. And they eventually get better at it. The time pressure forces them to get it, basically like short circuits their brain, most of them, to be able to be like, oh my gosh, I don't even have time to evaluate if this is a good or bad idea. I just have to get it down. And that's what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to have them override that analytical part of their brain, the judgment part of their brain that's saying, bad idea, this is bad idea, it's never going to work, right? I have had students who in the past have like, the time pressure is actually like really like drives their anxiety up. And so and I learned that the hard way because I had a student once when I set the timer for sketch prototyping just like burst into tears and started crying. So I felt very bad. And I talked to that student and, you know, I shared like, well, the reason we do the time is because I'm trying to have you come up with as many ideas as possible without trying to decide if it's a good idea or bad idea. I just want your ideas. I want your good ideas. I want your bad ideas. I want your ugly ideas. I want your perfect ideas. I want it all. And so we made a deal that like she could start in class, right, in the time we had, and she was allowed to go home and add more things if she wanted to. But she couldn't spend more than 30 minutes doing it. Okay. Because that's who she was. Like she would spend like, her mom was like, I'm trying to get her to go to sleep and she won't go to sleep. Right. So this child is like losing sleep because she's trying to get it perfect. And so we made an agreement and it worked out. And eventually like she got to the point where she's like, I don't think I need to go home and add more. I think this is good. I'm like, I love it. I love that you found a good enough place. Right. So this is what they're doing. They're prototyping, getting feedback, prototyping, getting feedback, prototyping, getting feedback. And your job as teacher is to check along the way to make sure that like they're actually applying their feedback, you know, to their prototype. All right. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to show you, like how to do. Okay. So I said 15 to 20. This is like if you're super rapid, you could stretch this out. But again, I would say sketch prototyping. I usually gave them like 10 minutes of sketch prototype. Paper prototyping, I gave them like maybe 15 minutes. And then for sturdy prototyping, it was like 20 minutes. Because with each prototyping, sketch prototyping, they may have like, you know, like 10 sketches. And then when they do paper prototyping, they're breaking it down to maybe like 3 paper prototypes. And then they're going to go to like 1 sturdy prototype, right? So it's like 10, 3, and 1, but the time increases. So it works out. Oops, I forgot to change the title here, but this is about prototyping and testing, right? So share the definition with them and let them know that you're going to do 3 kinds of prototyping, but in between, we are going to engage in empathy feedback, and that is how we test our ideas out. Okay, so here is, okay. Here, I'm going to show, yeah, let's just watch this. It's only a minute long.
Hi everyone, my name is Reed Schlegel, and this is my quick concept sketching process tutorial. When I start a project, I like to think of pen thickness, paper size, and time. As time moves forward and the phases increase, I like to have my pen thickness go down and my paper size go up. So what does this look like? In the beginning, I'm trying to be as generative as possible. So I think of small pieces of paper, thick pens equal big ideas, and not too much detail, which allows me to generate lots of concepts to move forward with. When I move forward,
So I paused there and I'm like, so what do you see here? Right? So, because that's what we're trying to do, is that level 1 is like Post-it papers, thicker pens, big ideas. Okay. Oops.
paper, thick pens equal big ideas and not too much detail, which allows me to generate lots of concepts to move forward with. When I move forward these concepts, I go to a medium-sized paper, which is usually 8.5 by 11 folded in half with a Pentel flare, which is a
So this is kind of like your paper prototyping. He's still sketching, but what I like to do is have them actually physically build it, which I'll show you in a little bit.
medium thickness pen. This allows me to get just enough information down, start pulling concepts together, but not really focus too much on the big details. And finally, I go to a large size paper and I use a very small phases increase. I like to have, this allows me to get all the details I want into my sketch.
And that's kind of like the sturdy prototype. Again, this guy is like doing it all through drawing, but the idea is that they would actually physically build this 3D model, right? Like out of cardboard, Legos, tape, whatever it is that we can find.
And then start building it with my other pen thicknesses.
Okay. Here's another video that's fun to watch.
Whenever starting a project, I always encourage people to really think broadly and loosely. A way in which I like to do this is sketching on a small piece of paper with a very large, thick pen. And when I do this, I try and get big ideas down on paper. I'm not focused on details, I'm just thinking about what is the large gesture. When you think about the large gesture first, and then you move these sketches into an actual nice marker rendering, you have the proportions figured out, and then you can start focusing much more on details. By going through this exercise, you come up with a lot of ideas very quickly, which allows you to really evaluate if the one you originally had was correct. Once you have all your ideas captured and you think you've exhausted all of your creativity, I always love to post these up on the wall, kind of organize them, gut check which ones are great, which ones are not working as well, and use those to either take one idea forward or multiple ideas forward, or take the best aspects from each, push them into one Frankenstein concept, and then move into a more intense marker render.
Okay, so that's pretty much the same concept, right? So generate ideas by sketching. Oh, I guess I only used to give them 5 minutes, but you could expand it, right? So after they do post-it sketching, so now they have their how might we's, right? How might we help Gwen get connected to people? How might we help Gwen, do something that makes a difference, right? Or how might we make sure Mrs. Oshiro is staying hydrated throughout the day? That's what they're now designing for, okay? So they're gonna do sketch prototyping. So you'll set a timer for them, Post-its, if you can get thick pens, pencils are fine too. Like I never bought special pens for my kids. I just said, use your pencil, like it's fine. And they had to come up with, I said, at least 3, right? I would tell them at least 3, but the maximum is however many you have. And then we went into the empathy or testing, right? So this is empathy feedback, is when we say empathy test, we're talking about getting feedback on something that you have designed. Okay, so there are many different charts, right? So this is one of them, liked, wished for, what if, wonder, okay? So the designer, I had to explicitly teach them. So the designer asks, and I would say, okay, you have 1 minute. Designers, you're gonna ask them, you're gonna show them. So maybe they would take like 2-3 minutes to show their Post-its. Okay, here's everything that I wrote, here's all my ideas. This is the how might we that I'm solving for. I'm trying to help Mrs. Oshiro stay hydrated throughout the day. I share my ideas. And now it's time to go to empathy feedback. So I'm gonna ask the person I'm interviewing. So I'm maybe sharing my ideas with a classmate, right? So tell me what you like about, these ideas. And I asked them, tell me what you like. And they have 1 minute to tell me everything that they like about all my different ideas. Oh, I like over here how you like have a special container, space on their workstation for water. I actually really like this idea too, where like it's on the wall and it becomes part of like the room decor, right? Whatever it is, their ideas. And the designer, this is again, it's kind of like an interview, right? So they're recording, the designer is recording this conversation so that they can just have the conversation. They don't have to sit there and be like, wait, I didn't get that down, right? You're not writing during this. You're just having a conversation. Tell me what you like. The person is talking. I like this. You're recording it on your iPad. Tell me what you wish. Oh, I wish this was different. I wish that was kind of like this. I wish you could have found out like, what their favorite designs are in terms of like, do they like stars? Do they like mermaids? Do they like, a football team? Like, could you have incorporated any of that? And that kind of blends into, okay, so tell me about your ideas. Is one of your ideas that I should maybe find out what sports they like and incorporate that into my design? Yeah, what if you like, right? So you're having them, the end user is saying, oh, what if you did this? Or what if you do that? They're saying, I like, I wish, what if you did this? And then tell me about what you wonder, right? So what questions do you have? And so that is being recorded. And then once they're done getting feedback on their designs, they would switch, right? So the other person would say, share, okay, I'm designing for, you know, Tom, who actually needs like a lot of help with his workstation. I'm actually designing a workstation. And this is my, how might we, and here are all my ideas, right? So they switch. And then you have to give them time to go back and listen to the recording and be able to identify or write down, what did they like, what did they wish, what ideas did they have, and what did they wonder? Okay, here's another chart, right? Like, what did you think worked? What do you think could be improved? What questions do you have? And do you have any ideas that you can share with me? It's pretty much the same as I like, I wish, I wonder, you know, and what if, but options based on like what you think might be better for your folks. You could further scaffold this to like where I share my ideas, all my sketches with one person, right? Here's Gwen, here's what I'm designing for, here are my ideas. And then like on day one, the only thing you focus on is what worked. And I get everything that worked, right? I record it, I listen to it, here's what worked, here's what they said was good. Then on day two, we come back and I share again my ideas, right? And then they tell me, oh, here's what I think could be improved, right? I record it, I listen, I write it down. And then the third day, right, you share again, hey, these are my ideas. Remember what I said about my ideas, right? Now, what questions or ideas do you have, right? So you can further scaffold it because each time they explain their ideas, new information comes out. So the more they share, well, this design, what I was really thinking about is this, right? Each time they share, the details start to come out about what they're thinking. Because some kids, like, you know, like myself, like I'm really bad at sketching. So I really have to tell them, here's what I was thinking as I was doing this. And that takes time. Okay. And then you go into paper prototyping. All right. I'm not going to show you the video, but you can watch the video. It tells them how to make things. You give them the time to do it. Okay. Same thing, right? Now you go into empathy feedback rounds because they're testing their ideas. And then you build sturdy prototypes. I had access to Legos, so I like to use Legos. You can also use cardboard boxes. This is where like maybe you ask parents to like, you know, donate tissue rolls or like tissue boxes, shoe boxes, glue guns, right? Whatever that sturdy prototype might be. You want it to be thicker material because this, they're only making one, right? So they went from like 10 ideas, paper prototype down to 3 ideas, and then sturdy prototype, they're making one thing. All right. And of course, you have to go over, you know, respect yourself and others, property in the process. Have them take pictures of their work. They're going to do testing and empathy again. So the empathy feedback rounds, right? I always have them get feedback from somebody different, right? So if I got feedback from Mark on Monday, on my sketch prototypes. When I make my paper prototypes and on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm going to go to Julie and I'm going to go to Sam. And then after I build my sturdy prototype, and they may need some time to build their sturdy prototype, right? Then I'm going to go to like, you know, Lee. So I'm getting information and feedback from multiple people throughout the process. And you can hit this, right? So they're jumping, they're basically kind of zigzagging around here. Empathy test, ideate, define, they further define the prototype. Sometimes I had students who were like, I have to go interview my person again because I don't know enough about them. Great. Let's figure out how to make that happen, right? So a lot of times after they do their sketch prototyping, their feedback will be like, well, based on like what you learned about your person, like, it sounds like you don't really know this about them, right? And you may have to do interviews again. Okay, so that gets us to the wrap up, right? ahead of time, you want to determine how many times you want students to engage in empathy feedback. It is so critical to the success of future projects, and learning how to give and receive feedback is huge, right, for students at any age. So the more time you can spend on that empathy, use the interview process, how you sit, recording, then listening, then note-taking. Like if you have them practice that like 4 to 5 times in one project, then like the next time it's much easier and they know exactly what to do. I would come up with a fun way to reveal the solution, right, to their end user. And if it's something that they can actually build, like I've had some students who are like, I actually want to make this, you know, for my person, like that's something you could help them do. And then I think Laurel was referring to this earlier, like how do you track their progress? Well, along the way, they have their notes, right? They have all their Post-its, and you have them go back and you have them reflect, like, where did you start? What does the journey look like? You know, and maybe you have them even teach it to you. Okay, so tell me what design thinking is. Like, what did you do? What do you think this is about? Describe the steps to me, or have them do a final sort of reflection project where they demonstrate that they understand what each of the steps mean. And I let them use their notes, you know, use all your notes, use all your pictures, show me evidence of what you did. And that could be sort of your summative assessment. I think that's it. That is the end of my presentation, and I think I'm right on time. So I'm not sure if there's any questions. Or if there are, I'll leave my contact information in the slide deck so people who have access to it, I'll add some slides so you can reach out to me. Yeah. Any questions?
It was so good.
Yay, awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, well, we want to thank you so much, Sumoha, and everyone for your participation. We hope that you found this session helpful and made some valuable connections. I love that. That was really great. And special thanks again to our sponsors, Sacred Hearts Academy Honolulu and the Augustine Educational Foundation, for making this conference free for the past 10 years. Help us complete the survey on the website iteach808.com so we can continue to receive grant funding, and add the website, and you will receive a certificate of participation after completing the survey, and automatically you're entered to win one of 10 $10 gift cards to Target if you complete your survey by February 4th. The survey will also be sent to the email address that you registered with, so check your spam folder for any emails from iteach808hawaii@gmail.com. Thank you for being here today, and feel free to watch the recordings. They'll be available in a week of the sessions that you didn't attend. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, Sumoha. Fantastic.